So the rest of what we have today is a bit of work group meeting report outs. So we know one of the challenges with the dual track setup we have is you can't be everywhere. So this is intended to really kind of quickly and briefly summarize the highlights of the discussion. Every year we also do compile meeting notes. So we're very fortunate again to have students with us from University of Massachusetts who have served as note takers in each session and have helped us just keep things moving the whole time. Appreciate their support very much. Based on their notes, we will compile a more collective set of notes for each work group session and even the plenary and other parts of the meeting to help with everybody's memory, but also to help for those who weren't here to be aware of what happened and where we're headed. Okay, so to that end, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the collaborative exercises we did yesterday. And just as a refresher, we started with a card sort exercise where we looked at purpose, structure, and process and the degree to which we were collaborating as NECAFs. And we're not going to do another card sort, first of all, today. But here are the results. This was what is NECAFs currently. So remember we asked at what level of collaboration are we functioning currently with respect to purpose, structure, and process. And so with respect to purpose, it seems like a pretty heavy dose of networking. So on the far left side, some coordination and some partnering, and a little bit of collaboration in the purpose. So it's a couple things. One is it's not uncommon when doing these exercises that we get quite a bit of spread. So NECAFs can mean different things to different people. That's fine. We're not aiming for one answer here. We're trying to get a sense of the landscape. So that's this current state for structure, pretty overwhelmingly along the lines of cooperation, alliance, coordination, partnership. With respect to process, it's kind of all over the map. So people's perspective of NECAF's processes are really all along the spectrum of this framework. What NECAF should be. Pretty, again, with respect to purpose, strong indications that people want more coordination, more partnership, and more collaboration on purpose. In terms of structure, again, I think this is a case of where it seems like people want lots of different things from NECAFs, and that's fair. And again, I want to reiterate, everybody is welcome in NECAFs, and you can come any way you choose. So that's this really rings true for where we wanted to be from the beginning. In terms of process, I'm hearing loud and clear from this that folks are looking for a stronger coalition forming and stronger collaboration opportunities in terms of process. And so when you look at these side by side, sort of pre-post or current versus where we should be, overall, I think it's a shift. We need to be more intentional about shifting from networking type purpose, structure, and processes towards collaboration is sort of the summary for me. I would welcome other reflections on this. I've had 5 more minutes with it than you have, so.
Hasn't gotten out as far as other people would like it to go, and I think that's in our group, that was one of the discussions. I also think you need to keep in mind that we had 10 minutes to go through 6 things, so maybe people weren't doing deep thinking, they were doing top of the brain,
Yep.
Give it feedbacks, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't throw yourself under the bus too much on this, but I do think it's interesting to look at where they think we're doing, where we as a group are doing well and where we as a group would like to go. So I think it was really productive for that, but that's what I would say is that overall people are very enthusiastic about what's been done. It just gave people an opportunity to clarify where they'd like to see it go.
Thanks. Beth, behind you?
The other discussion that we had at the table that I was at was the fact that we all represented different groups that attend NECAFs, and I feel like if you broke this out into separate groups, you might get a different response from the pre versus the post.
So brace yourselves for next year. No. Wasn't complicated enough. Yeah. Other reflections? Hannah?
I wonder if we were skewed a little bit because we were told it was a spectrum. So red was kind of like the end goal.
Right. You got a microphone there if you want it.
I think I'm done. Just that red was one end of a spectrum. And at least in my mind, I kind of thought like, okay, red maybe is the goal. So that's where we want to be.
Right.
I wonder if that skewed things a little bit. That's all.
May have. Don? Over here.
So, I appreciate that red might have been where we want to be, but I also, when I decided where to go in terms of what we should be, I was not convinced that red was where we needed to be, because certain things, it needs to be organized, it needs to be structured, but other things, I think if you have too much top-down hierarchy, close your ears, my federal colleagues. Too much top-down hierarchy, it can really stifle innovation, right? And I would much rather, where we want to be may not be this really rigid hierarchical organization. We want to have maybe some rigid processes so things stay in control, but I would also like us to be flexible enough to realize that maybe we need to change direction and we shouldn't be so locked down and hierarchical for all things.
Yeah. One of the things it highlights for me is using this vocabulary more intentionally. And for example, there's a strong showing for more collaborative processes and more collaborative purpose among some of the population that attended. And that, to me, it's not a spectrum of good to bad, it's a spectrum of degree of collaboration. And so just being intentional about when we are doing things and seeking collaborative engagement. For example, if we're planning to do a collective proposal within NECAFs, making sure we're getting that out. I think somebody brought up, Betsy, perhaps, about making sure that intent is being communicated clearly and widely so that we can engage people in that process. But there are other times where it really is networking. We're connecting resources with need. So that's the thing that rung true for me, is just knowing that we serve different purposes. Yeah. Chuck?
And frankly, I think networking is a huge value of these kind of meetings, and the networking enables you to create the relationship that allows you to collaborate.
Yep.
So having that connectivity between the blue and the red and other pieces, I think is important to recognize.
Yep.
That there's a lot more value that comes out here than is represented, to me anyway, than me picking blue or red.
Yeah. Thanks, Chuck. And it shifts, it moves, right? You can come and go and move as an individual. That's the other point here is this is trying to describe this organism. It's not Elizabeth and I, right? So if we want more collaboration, we can help facilitate that, but it's going to mean everybody else being part of that as well, right? More actively. If we're not doing it now, we need to do it in the future. There's a mirror to hold up.
One of the criteria that makes it work is that there's a neutral body that is facilitating the conversation. So we don't come to the conversation with a predisposed perception of things, because our stake in the game is specifically to facilitate coordination and communication. We are not coming at it from, it's not, if that makes sense. So my role is entirely NECAFs, and I don't have a side role of also performing inspections or also doing on-farm readiness review or also doing some other thing. It is completely neutral, and it is intended to be facilitation. So it's about bringing together the group of autonomous, interdependent, interdisciplinary individuals intentionally in a way that fosters movement forward. And so it's our job to then facilitate that from a neutral aspect. And so that's one of the things I didn't talk about, so I'm talking about it now, but that's one of the overarching things that's going on here as well. And to Don's point, maybe I don't need to be at a 5, a 3 is sufficient, so, yeah.
Well, and even being at 5 may be a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Right?
Other thoughts? This is a great discussion. Thank you. Okay. So the next exercise we did was the spider web for sustainability exercise, and just to reorient everybody, this is really thinking about the key dimensions of performance that will lead to sustainability for an organization. And we selected 6 to essentially rate ourselves on. And we did the same sort of approach. These were reach, strong collaboration, community support, implementation quality, purpose and vision, and community fit. And rate these along the spectrum of poor functioning to functioning very well. And so here are the results. It's kind of interesting for me to go from what was basically a graphical exercise to now tabular data. We'll get back to the graphical presentation in a minute, but up on the top here is the spiderweb results. These were the table votes. Remember, we reached table consensus and then voted on the spider webs. And so one of the, I guess the thing that I see here is purpose and vision was the one that came out as being the area where we're functioning most highly. And all the others kind of fall in at just below 4, 3.8, 3.6. When we look at the individual voting down below for where we should be, this is where everybody had a chance to vote not only on the specific dimension of sustainability performance, but also the degree of performance. So remember, in this case, based on your dot votes, the 2 areas where people felt we should be focusing work on, or where we should be performing most, were reach and strong collaboration. That's the N value is provided on the left-hand side for each of those. So that's the count of votes from everybody for that particular dimension. So you can see reach and strong collaboration had the highest, followed in a second grouping of community fit and implementation quality, and then by community support and purpose and vision. So that's the first level of my review of this, is just the overall votes, if you will, for where we should be. The second part of this is essentially the delta between the table consensus and the individual votes. And so I tried to capture that on the left-hand side of the table. And so you can see, not only do people feel we should be focused on reach, but there's room to grow there. There's room to improve our performance. I don't know what a 0.3 means here, right? It's a difference. So that's another layer for us to explore. But there are some differences here. So the places where there were differences from currently is as a table consensus to individual should be were reach, implementation quality, and strong collaboration. And so you can look at that just in terms of the average scores. It might be a little bit easier to digest. And there were some where there were decreases, which is kind of interesting. And then graphically, this is, again, we went from a graphical voting to a table. Now we're back to the spiderweb presentation. That's blue is where we currently are. Red is where we should be. Hard to sort of see much difference there. But side to side, you can see a little bit. Again, room to improve in reach. There's room to improve in strong collaboration. Room to improve in implementation quality. And support for those 3 as well in terms of the total number of votes. So I would be very interested to know if anybody has specific examples of why they put their dot on any one of these dimensions, and if there's a specific thing or specific activity that you had in mind. For example, if you voted for improving reach, what was it specifically? And we had some discussion about this yesterday, but I would love to hear any examples folks had in mind when voting. Betsy? Thanks for leading us off every time.
Fill in a void, fill in a void. I think, and this is one of the things I sort of ponder about this group. Who are the people that need to be included in this meeting? As an example, we have a buyer group. We've had about 2 or 3 buyers show up for multiple years in a row. Does that constitute a group that we need to be attracting? And if the answer is yes, then we need to make sure more than 2, all hail Steve and Jamie, who are, come every year and really participate. But I don't know the answer to that question. I think the other thing is growers, right? We have a few growers that come, but we don't have a diversity of growers that come. Is that an important group for us to be reaching out to? So I think, to me, there's some unknown about who is it that belongs in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And some things are pretty clear, but I think in other ways it's not very clear to me.
It might add processors to that too, small processors.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's actually on my eval form.
Okay,
I
great.
did include that.
Hey,
but,
great segue, by
yeah.
the way. As we're talking about this, there are yellow sheets on your table, which are our evaluation forms. And if you don't want to bring up your point in this room right now, we would love to hear it on the form. But we'd love to hear it in this room too. Other reflections on Spiderweb results? Or more on Betsy's point about audience inclusion?
So for me, this is very produce heavy, where my experience is not produce heavy. I'm going to learn more because I don't know as much about it, but for me, maybe more updates on the PC rule from the FDA guidance, because we got a little bit of it yesterday, but more PC changes, the inspections, how it's affecting people,
Okay,
maybe.
thanks. Any other thoughts on reach? Mary?
I was just thinking today, I met some people who were new to the whole FSMA, and I'm wondering if there could ever be a place somewhere where new people could get up to speed, or at least up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because getting up to speed takes a long time. Yeah, so new people, so they're not like, I'm so overwhelmed, just something to ease them in, maybe, I don't know, some guidance on that.
Okay, great. FSMA in general?
Both
Yep.
sides.
Okay. Okay, PC and PSR, PCHF and PSR. Gretchen, do we have a, right over here?
Kind of building on that, I would love to see some more student representation. I know Amanda Kinchela's crew is here, but as we prepare a lot of the college and even high school workforce to go into these jobs, I think it's important for them to hear some of these conversations, and they could be booted into the newbies section if you develop something like that.
Great idea. Other thoughts on this? Great. Do you want to take a minute and talk about evaluations? Okay. So the yellow sheets are your evaluations. Would love one from everybody before you leave. We've used a consistent evaluation for I think the past 3, if not past 3 years, 4 years. And there have been some great hallway discussions that we've had with people providing specific feedback along the way. One theme was, for example, this idea of who's in the room and making sure we get more people in the room. And if they're coming to the room, making sure that the sessions are relevant to them. So it is produce heavy. The session, the agenda is produce heavy based on past feedback. We're hearing some additional feedback now that will help design future programs. That's a good example of where we'd like to have feedback. What would your ideal session layout look like, or your topics? The other thing that would be helpful is if you know of audiences that aren't here that should be, offering some ideas of how to do that outreach and how to reach those audiences to help, and how to help them be here would be really helpful as well. So again, it's another sort of ask to use that open comment section to really help us design something that's going to work better for you next year in terms of annual meeting layout. Anything else? And evals? Okay. Oh, yeah. Are we going to collect them at the back table? So the registration table right outside that door will have a collection box. So we just said all that. Also, I know that the format for the collaboration exercises may not work for everybody, so if you have other ideas that have come up or feedback that you would like to make based on some of that framework, that's another opportunity. The evaluations are another opportunity to capture some of that. The last thing I want to say before we get into work group reporting is we are planning to be in West Virginia with this meeting next year. Do I have this right? Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia? I want to make sure I'm using the right geographic. Yeah. So it's we reached out to our friends in West Virginia for some suggestions on location, and their feeling is, it's far from them, but it's going to be easier for everybody else to get to. It's kind of Virginia, DC access. So the other point is we'll be a little bit later next year than we have been in the past. That's we have two other large events we schedule around this time of year. One is the New Jersey Ag Convention. One is the Mid-Atlantic Fruit and Vegetable Conference, and they've shifted as well. So we'll be a week later than normal. The other feedback that I received in the hallway was we really could use 3 days for this. If you feel strongly one way or the other on that, please note that in the evaluations. Some folks are feeling like we're just getting going with some of these conversations and we got to wrap up.